Strange weapons of World War I, the Chauchat LMG. The Chauchat was the standard French light machine gun of World War I. It was chambered in the 8x50mm Lebel. This weapon was designed by a French designer named Louis Chauchat and his partner Chauchat. The weapon system was designed between 1903 and 1909. The Chauchat usually has a bad reputation from the First World War because of jamming and extraction problems, but a lot of this reputation is actually wrong. So I will explain this while explaining the history of the Chauchat overall. So let's start from the beginning. The Chauchat that we all know today started off as the Chauchat Shutter M1911 or the Chauchat Shutter M1911. The M1911 was a prototype light machine gun chambered in the 7x59mm experimental Muriner cartridge, the same cartridge used in the Muriner limited production semi-automatic rifle. The M1911 had a much longer barrel than the standard Chauchat. There was a second Chauchat design or Chauchat design in 1913 called the Model 1913. The official designation of both of these guns were the Fusili Militaire C7 de Protection Systeme CS M1911 or Model 1911 and Model 1913. In 1912 and in 1913, the Model 1911 and Model 1913s were tested. The Model 1913 was chambered in the 8x50mm Lebel. When World War I started in 1914, the French Air Force needed a machine gun for their aviation crops. So the Chauchat company or the Shutter company designed between 65 and 100 M1913 machine guns for the French Air Force, which were used at the beginning of World War I in 1914. In 1915, the more common version of the Chauchat, known as the Csr G Model 1915, entered service. This Model 1915 was a redesign of the 1913, but with the magazine on the underside, or on the bottom, like most light machine guns at the era, with the exception of the Madsen LMG. The early model 1915s had a bad reputation because of their jamming problems. This was largely due to the design of the magazine for the early 1915. The early model 1915 Chauchats had an open magazine which allowed for dirt and grout to get into the gun during firing, which would cause the guns to either jam up or in some cases would increase overheating, which caused many of the guns to stall during firing. In late 1915, early 1916, the Chauchat's magazine was redesigned to have a closed magazine, which improved the performance of the Csr G 1915. According to most French soldiers during the First World War, the redesigned Chauchat actually worked properly for the most part. They could fire between 150 and 250 rounds without any jams or stoppages. The only problem with the Chauchat overall was the gun still overheated, which would cause the gun to seize up and stop firing. This was a huge problem during the long battles in the First World War, especially during battles like Verdun, Passchendaele, Ypres, and later on the battles of the 100 Days Offensive, in which soldiers would be battling for days, literally, 24-hour cycles. So you can't, in that sort of environment, you can't have your gun seizing up after just 100 to 200 rounds. In 1917, the U.S. Army entered World War I, and the Americans wanted their own version of the Chauchat. the French and Americans worked together to design the Model 1918. The Model 1918 was a redesign of the Chauchat, except this variant of the Chauchat fired from a straight, slightly curved magazine instead of the half moon magazine of the Csr G M1915. The American Chauchat was also chambered in the 30-06 Springfield caliber and had a reduced magazine pack capacity of only 16 rounds when compared to the 20 rounds of the French version. The model 1918 Chauchat also suffered from manufacturing issues, which resulted in the gun jamming and in some cases parts breaking after only a handful of rounds were fired. Many American GIs threw away their American Chauchats for French Chauchats, or in some cases they would prefer the older Bennett Mercer LMG, which was the American version of the Hotchkiss Model 1909. The Chauchat M1918 was pretty much the worst Chauchat of all of them, and is the reason why the Chauchat has such a bad reputation in the US. On a design level, the M1918 looks badass, but it had many problems. Also during World War I, the Germans captured a large number of Chauchats. Many of these were rebuilt into what the Germans called the Maschinengewehr Entwicklung Model 1915 or Model 1916. This was pretty much a Chauchat with a redesigned magazine and was chambered for the 8x57mm Mauser, or the 7.92 by 57mm Mauser. This gun had an 18 to 20 round magazine. It still had the standard 240 to 300 rounds per minute. It is unknown how well the German Chauchat performed on the battlefield, so I can't really go into that. After World War I, countries like Poland and Belgium received the Chauchat also. The Belgian army redesigned their Chauchats to fire the 7.65 by 53mm Argentine cartridge. That version remained in service until the fall of Belgium in 1940. The Polish Chauchat was pretty much the same as the French, except it was chambered for the 7.92 by 57mm Mauser also, and remained in service until the fall of Poland in 1939, during the beginning of the Second World War. The Chinese also produced their own copy of the Chauchat. This version of the Chauchat is known as the M1929 or M1930. It's pretty much the same gun, except it was rechambered for the 7.92mm Mauser and used the straight magazine seen on the American Chauchat, except the Chinese version reportedly worked, but not that many were produced. There was a second Chinese variant. This was pretty much a redesign, almost a complete redesign, except that it still had the same gas system. It was still chambered for the 7.92 Mauser. The only difference was the buttstock of this gun. It had more of a traditional buttstock rather than the straight buttstock seen on most shell shots. The French military also designed a carbine version of the Chauchat. This carbine was meant for tank crews, except this weapon was more of an assault rifle. The carbine version was known as the Chauchat Rebbe Rose Model 1918. It was fed by a 20 to 25 round magazine. It was chambered for the rear 8x35mm Rebbe Rose cartridge, which was designed for the Rebbe Rose experimental assault rifle, which was also designed between 1917 and 1918. There was a second version of the Chauchat carbine, a cheaper version, known as the Chauchat Red Rose M1918 Variant 2. This was chambered in the original 8x50mm cartridge and was fed by 8 to 16 round charger clips, but mostly 8 rounds. This gun had the same rate of fire as the standard Chauchat. Neither of these weapons were adopted in any large number. I heard reports that they were used, a small number were used during the First World War, but I don't know, I can't really verify that or not. That's pretty much the end of the Chauchat. I think the last faction to use the Chauchat recorded was the Nazi German army during the invasion of Nazi Germany in 1945 on the Western Front and on the Eastern Front in the hands of the Volkssturm or People's Militia and some units of the Waffen SS and the regular German army known as the Wehrmacht. Some sources state the Chauchat was still in service during the First Indochina War between 1946 and 1954 in the hands of the Viet Minh. Some sources state that the Chauchat was used by Algerian partisans during the French-Algerian War of 1954, and some American sources state the Chauchat was still being used during the Vietnam War between 1963 and 1974 and 1975. If so, that would make the Chauchat one of the longest serving LMGs in history. So yeah, that's it. If I had to pick, I would say the Chauchat M1913 and the Chauchat M1918 carbine and 8x35 are probably the cooler examples since they are the rarest, but that's just my opinion. So if you guys have any other ideas for strange guns you want me to go over, if not, I'll just pick some random ones and make future videos on it. But until next time, this was J-Man Time signing off, and if you have any ideas for any future videos, just put them in the comments section below. So until next time, see you guys.